I resigned that Monday because I was like, I've pushed myself enough and I will not push myself for a dead end. And I need to make sure that my next choice is growth based. I found that when I'm not heart centered in what I do, that creates a lot of havoc around me. I realize I will never let the limitations of others hold me back. And I always tell my clients this too, don't let the limitations of others become your own.
You know, I often say that we're born as our brightest, most authentic burning lights. And then our coaches, teachers, parents, employers ultimately start telling us all the things we should and shouldn't do, should and shouldn't be. And yeah, we start living into this dynamic in this box based on who the world has told us who to be instead of who we are.
Did you know you could literally stay married and treat your spouse like absolute crap and there's no repercussions for it because you're under the legal veil of marriage?
Welcome back, everybody, to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now. We love to tell the real, raw stories of some of the most influential and impactful people who are moving others in this world through their work, through their passions, through their missions, through their stories. And today we have an absolute dynamite guest. Just in the little pre-show, the energy is just felt. It's real, it's raw, and she self-identifies as her purpose being to lead with love. You know, if you listen to this show, what I believe about the heart, what the vibrations of the heart can do, as well as if we love first, what that can absolutely do in our lives. But she's developed an evolved methodology to be able to really help people step into clarity in who they are, evolve into who they're becoming, and actually live the lives that they want. Highly successful entrepreneur, someone who helps and moves many other people. And I just can't wait to dive in because her story is dynamite. It's dynamic. And I'm sure that you're going to learn from it. So Kareen, so happy to have you here with us today.
So great to be here, Brian. I'm excited to serve the community.
Well, my friend, you've been on my other show. So you know that one of the only questions I like to ask on this and the other is after I give a little intro, it's who are you in your words?
Well, like you said in the intro too, I do find recently getting very clear on my purpose is to love first. I feel like that is something that's innate to me, and I've been fortunate to be a leader in my own life and businesses to lead from that place. Meaning, I found that when I'm not heart centered in what I do, that creates a lot of havoc around me. So whether it was a career development move in corporate that led to burnout to then lead to my own independent, work, because I just felt that I needed to love myself better through my circumstances, that then would have a ripple effect on those I was working with. If I were to categorize myself in my 20s, I was a bit of a bulldozer, not very polished, but very accomplished and very much about the doing and the corporate climb and make it happen. And then moving into my 30s, from all that dysfunctional push, I was all about my inner healing and focusing on my health and how can I find a more integrative path and again, love myself deeper. And then I moved into, relationship and getting married and being focused in that. Then into my 40s, it was like, okay, now that I'm established, what impact do I want to have? Right. So every decade has its own mission. And now, in this integrative stance and the fact that I get to choose to be an entrepreneur, I get to choose who I want to work with and build up. It's been so gratifying to come from one of my core values, which is love. And that's kind of how I would summarize, how I try to show up in the world. I want to leave every room knowing that I added value to it.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is sometimes just your presence in a room, even if you aren't active in it, can leave value in it. And oftentimes it's the subtleties of even that we dismiss earlier in our lives. Mm-hmm. Right. What I appreciate about the way that you discuss with all of that is, they've actually done studies and they've shown, right, that the heart actually produces about 500 times the electrical charge to the brain. Mm-hmm. And it produces about 5,000 times the magnetic pull to the brain. Right. We constantly have this dynamic of, even as you call yourself, it's like I was a little bit of a bulldozer, right? I often talk about these areas that we protect ourselves, that we guard ourselves ultimately to make ourselves feel safe or protected, seen, understood, or connected. But the second we protect ourselves, we actually disconnect ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so that heart that has always existed within you, that heart delivered through significant layers of armor, can also be really confusing for people, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I identify with so many elements of your story because a lot of my life, I identified with so many people not understanding me, my intent, because my big energy, my love, and the way that I was delivering them through my armor would communicate it differently through my actions and behaviors.
Yeah.
And so what I really just appreciate, even around the like dynamics of how you talked about those decades and where it is really what you were doing was shedding layers to actually allow your heart to exist and lead in front.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the power of loving first actually also has a diffusing component towards armor.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool just to hear how you start. And also, as you discuss, I'm still finding clarity, right?
Always.
This idea of loving first, right? Again, it's what your purpose is. It's to lead with love. What's funny is love first is the first staying of like a couple of one of the things that we teach. And we had that literally on our shirts at our last retreat.
Amazing.
Where did you learn the power of this? And how did you explore making your heart accessible so that love could exist first?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if I were to go back, when you do like the inner child work, right? Like if you're into self-development or any just self-healing, it's like what happened when, or what happened to you that made you want to put the armor on in the first place, which is a survival skill, right? And I would say I was in survival mode from a very young age, just from dysfunction in the household. But the love of me, like I was the kid that when anyone would come into the house, I'd be running at them with my hands up high, like waiting to be picked up and hugged. Like that was me. I was like, what? You're like so excited about who just came in. And I was, just wanted to show them love and receive love in return. And that was my nature. And that I have literal memories of it around like 3-4 years old. Like, so that's how I know I started. That's how I know that that's like my innate energy, because I tap into that version of me when I'm feeling more weighed down. Like when I'm feeling less in my love space and more, in my maybe strategic doing space, right? Like both effective, but one's a little lighter than the other. I will tap into her. And then, so I know that was my innate self. Years gone on and having to survive the household I was in the role that I was meant to play. I was not meant to, I was given, I would say, is that I was like the glue. I'm a middle child of 3. My parents got divorced it started when I was 11, official while like 13, but it was so about them and not about us in the love of making sure we all came out unscathed during that time. And I was the only one that actually had communication with every member of the family during that time. And that created this like burden of responsibility that I needed to be to survive it, right? Like to feel that like I had my worth in that moment of all this pain, like I had to show up somewhere. So I've always been a very generous person, and it sometimes, I would say it would turn into people pleasing just for peace. And the people pleasing for peace is like the most detrimental energy I think you can put out there, right? And then figuring out, okay, well, it's working in some arena for me to survive the day, but that tendency and that turned into overachievement just to be seen. It was just such a toxic layering of activity that really muted the version of love that I know that I have rediscovered and reconnected to today. So it was a lot of years of an inner battle of how can I be who I really want to be, and then also function in this world and function in my relationships, and maybe moving even into thriving, and maybe moving into pleasure and joy. It all came with a lot of suffering in the beginning of like how who I chose to love and what I received in return did not feel reciprocated, and it definitely bled into a lot of different arenas. So I knew it at a young age. It got definitely masked and veiled. I use the word veil as you use the word armor, because in every relationship, sometimes we have to like put a veil on to survive it, or to be in relation with a person and have that exchange. That once I started removing the veil, I was like, okay, no, this is who she is. And this is how, I will choose to show up. And I think declaring love as one of my core values also helped me because coming up in a very male dominated tech environment in my career, you couldn't show that side. But that was actually what gave me the most success because I was able to care about my team in a way that they had never been cared for before and still deliver. And I think that was a differentiator of integrating like the feminine and masculine leadership styles, very young age as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious the level of work you have done for you to be able to recap, right? Almost from a clinical perspective, like the patterns and dynamics that shaped it.
A lot of investment.
I fully understand. I've been on this. I've done the same. I'm still on that path because there is no final destination, right? But but it is one of those things that, like, when you can see it so clearly that you can synthesize your life through elements of patterns that shaped you, right? Like it's just obvious the depth that you've gone, that you've gone, and. You know, I often say that we're born as our brightest, most authentic burning lights, right? And then it's like our coaches, teachers, parents, employers, like ultimately start telling us all the things we should and shouldn't do, shouldn't be. And yeah, we start living into this dynamic in this box based on who the world has told us who to be instead of who we are. Right. And so many of us do that. In fact, most of the high performance that I work with in some form or fashion, no different than what you described, whether it's from trauma or some dynamic within the home or the first time they got attention in sports, right? We've all in some form of respect have learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, which was contingent upon what we did versus who we are.
Yes.
Right. And so much so that it's unconscious for so long in our lives, at least it was for me. And so until we start to actually become conscious of the fact that we are operating this way, that we were shaped and conditioned to live to somebody else's standards or someone else's belief, we don't even realize we're carrying armor. We don't even realize that we're not living in congruence to who we are. And so in your synthesized version, what I wasn't able to extract is when was the moment that you started to become aware that you were not living to your standards, your beliefs, your desires, but someone else's? And what were those first steps to begin to reverse it?
So I think, as we're coming up, belonging is one of the core needs, right? The connection and belonging, right? To feel like you're part of something. And when you're raised in a way my culture where I come from, it's a very large culture. It's a very loud culture. It's like in order to belong, you have to like show up a certain way to be seen or to be of service, actually, because most of the women in my culture are of service. And then having the track of being independent or like making a career for myself was definitely a differentiator. So all of a sudden I wasn't really belonging even to the culture. It was like when you start to follow your own path, there can be risks about what you leave behind. So that's why I think I was such a bulldozer in my 20s, because I knew that if I could push for financial independence, then I could create where I wanted to belong to. So that was like one of the gifts of the tension, I guess you could say, at that age, that helped me flow. But I think, with that container of belonging, unfortunately, comes competition and comparison, right? Like when we're in school systems, we're learned to compare ourselves to others in the student body. Then there's the grading system that we get that tells us whether we're worthy or not. I mean, it's just like embedded, right? Like it's embedded so young. And it's part of the system that we choose to or not choose to. We're kind of like indoctrinated, and I can't say the word, into it. And then, right? Like we are part of it to belong, and the measure of whatever success was in those moments, that's, the box we're in. I found that when the first time where I kind of challenged the system was when it had to do with a blocker of my personal growth and my financial growth. And those two things first, were the first indicators. So you asked me, when did it start?
Yeah.
At 23. So I was like a year out of college in one of my first jobs. I had moved went to school in DC and I'd moved to San Francisco at the time. It was like the .com boom. And so tech was coming up, and I knew that if I had come back to New York, I would have never left New York. So I was like, let me go all the way west. Plus, it gave me distance from the disconnection I was feeling in my family unit to just go start somewhere else, and then figure out my path on my own. very risky, very scary, not knowing much other than having a college degree and like working through school. I always worked, you know, to build up my resume and my acumen. So when I got into that first job, I had busted my butt to the point where like the burnout was real. I was a business analyst or systems analyst. I don't even know how I got this job, Brian. I got a system analyst job with no tech background, right? But because I had an acumen for it and I knew how to communicate well and bring process together, I got this gig.
That's how you got the job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I didn't know nothing about technology. Here I am, though, all of a sudden, like on the back end. I mean, I'm 23 and I'm building business resumption plans for a credit card collections department of a large bank. Who am I?
Dude, you and I have so many similarities.
We
it's
do?
Insane.
Did you do what?
I have to no. So not it's but in a similar. It's in a it's in the financial services industry.
Yeah.
As an intern, actually in college, I helped create an accounting software to be able to track basically collected and uncollected commissions across the entire book of business, and to be able to reconcile it based on payment dates and frequency and contract terms,
right?
Because they were doing it manually, and in a summer, I uncovered over $1 million of uncaptured revenue that we were able to put a process in place that was so easy for us to capture. And of course, I was a hero. Right. But I was like 19. Right. I had no idea, freaking fucking clue what I was doing, and I was just like asking questions. Right. Yep. By the way, that's been a key to a lot of everything, though, is just I've asked a lot of questions and assumed I don't know a lot. And here's the reality. Like, so this is your story, but holy shit. Like, when you started saying that, I was like, the relevance of that to like one of my first successes, I was like, oh my God, because it was a huge win, but I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like,
And here's the thing, though.
I do
want to make I want to make this point, though, because you're bringing up something that we were able to do at the start of our careers that I don't know we're giving enough opportunity to people of that age group to fumble and figure it out. And I just want to bring that up so that if anyone's listening and you're hiring people in their 20s, to show that their willingness and resourcefulness is needed in order to make it better for you going forward. Like, give them a freaking chance, because that's another box that I think there's so much fear and anxiety in that age group right now on even trying, because of cancel culture and because of the failure rate of being scolded or like casted out when they don't do it absolutely right. And so I just want to bring that up because we had that freedom, you know, when we started out, where it's like they gave me the opportunity, and because of my resourcefulness and my desire to only achieve, really, I mean, that's like the overachiever's dilemma right there. It's like, you will push hard until you figure it out. Well, obviously that push led me to physical crisis. So I basically was all of a sudden on a 24/7 on call. Back then it was like a pager system. That's how I'm like aging myself, but it was still 24/7. And I wasn't even an all-call person, but I was part of the support team, helped them build their process. And then our internal clients relied on me because I knew what was going on. So they'd rather have me get involved than the actual people that were supposed to do it. Things like that, right? But I was so willing. To do whatever it takes to just move forward, right? And get to the next level. So my management changed. And right before that happened, I actually literally was sent to the ER because of the stress I was under and how my body was starting to fail. I was literally in the ER at like, I don't know, it was 2 a.m. And I was worried that I wouldn't I was literally like, kept checking the time. Like, I need to still get to work by 7 a.m. Like it was such a disconnect between what I felt would give me so-called freedom, like the financial comforts of that push for that check, versus what was actually happening when my body was telling me, you need to quit this job. Like, this is not the path you're meant to be on. But what actually did it for me was when my management changed. I had this manager come in who I was so excited about, because I was like, oh, maybe I'll learn from someone. Because I was literally like thrown into the fire and figure it out, which I did. No guidance. Just, great. Go ahead and do it. And then this manager came in. I was very excited about her. And I had a one-on-one with her. And I said, listen, when I started the job, these were my role and responsibilities. Now I'm doing all these things, and I had it all listed out. I was very professional about it, just to show her. And she literally said to me, I don't know what you're complaining about. What you're doing is your job. Just keep doing it. And for some reason, getting that message after the push I had gone through, and I was like, oh, wow. And all I was asking her was like, what path do you see for me here?
Yep.
I wasn't asking for a raise. I was literally just saying, this is how far I've come. Where are we going? Like, what is the path here? And I immediately saw, I was like, wow, okay. So all this effort, now I've hit a glass ceiling with this manager I'm reporting into. She's going to be the only one that directs me forward. So what do I do about this? And I realized, no, I will never let the limitations of others hold me back. And I always tell my clients this too, don't let the limitations of others become your own. So if someone I'm working for is saying, I have nothing more for you, or this is all you've got, and I don't have a path or plan, and your core value or the thing at that time is growth and advancement and the what's next, that was a big no. Your misalignment with my values and theirs. And so that conversation was on a Thursday. I resigned that Monday because I was like, I have pushed myself enough and I will not push myself for a dead end. And I need to make sure that my next choice is growth-based, because that is a true focus of mine, with a better environment for me to lead within. And I think because I learned that lesson so young, in my career life, it really started that navigation of what else. If this is all you can get out of this situation, it's time to leave it and go find out what else.
Yeah.
Like, what else? And those it's been my guiding force with every single risk I've taken, move I've done, the ability to let something go. I'm so grateful that it happened so young, because so many people will sit for years in that scenario and then feel like there's some random hope that these people are going to change, or the container is going to be different, or it might show up sometime in the future. Maybe they'll see me. I don't know how many people work so hard to be like, well, maybe they'll see me someday.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this is your path. Life is so short, So I would say that was one of the big stories in my younger years that helped me dig in deeper for myself to be like, what do I really want? And is this the container I can do it within?
Yeah. So Kareen, do I have permission to give you just a tiny little reflection? And this may be consistent with what you already know, but anybody who knows me or listens to this is you'll know I don't give two shits about being right. I care about getting it right.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating for me because so much of your path, you almost give credit to external circumstances giving you the ability to do something. But whether it was the situation you just described or the move across the country that you describe as a big risk, there are many people who have opportunities to do or make similar choices that you did, or who have been in situations where they did not take a step to advocate for themselves or realign or recognize that this isn't serving them. And then to your point, they remain trapped there for years. And so one of the things that I give, and I'm grateful that I had the gift to do, and you have as well, is that you've not allowed your circumstances to keep you stuck. They've shaped you, refined you, but you have had an element of conviction and understanding of at least how at a very little level earlier in life you can advocate for yourself when you realize that this isn't in my best interest. Yeah. Even if you couldn't go to the level that you can today. And so where did those traits come from for you to have that confidence, conviction, and enough self-worth to value the understanding of the circumstance you're in and to still adjust it?
So all of it still is very scary in the moment. I want to just give that the reality to folks. When you do take the big leap, yes, it is scary, and yes, I might have a pit in my stomach while doing it, but the point is where. And I love that you brought up the word self-worth, because I honestly didn't feel any self-worth majority of my childhood. And I was a highly effective person. And I always say I was highly functional in my dysfunction because I always knew how to outwardly perform. That's what I was taught. You outwardly perform, even though inwardly you're, a hot mess, And so with the lack of self-worth in my, I'd say that, it was probably like adolescence into my teen years. It was really around the divorce years of my parents and their needs coming before mine and me having to be the caretaker and in essence of like the emotional balancing that is so imbalanced in our home. And I also kind of grew up with like a mea culpa energy. And I don't know where I learned that, where it was like, if anything's meant to happen, let it happen to everyone, let it happen to me instead of everyone else. Like, so there was some sacrificial lessening. It's been so long now that I've felt that I don't even know how to like, plug back into it with the work that I've done. Right. But I do know that when you do that inner work, so through different therapy, even in my teen years, through the beginning of college to then go out and figure out my career, I, with the distance that being in California gave me to be more self-managed and create the environments around me and at least start to create the environments around me that made me feel more seen, I think my self-worth started to tick up. I wouldn't say that I had it solved at that age, but the risk-taking part, I remember telling myself at the time, I can always be where I am today. I don't know. And I'm not even sure like where I even got this lesson, but I think it's probably because I did the big move, I only had I think I sold everything I had and maybe I had $5,000 on me when I moved to California, and I hustled to find some part-time work. And then I found an apartment that was actually in my budget, which was crazy, not in the best of neighborhoods, but I was like, let me figure this out. Right.
Made it work. Yeah.
There's this like resourcefulness that I tap into because with every step I take forward, I know if I had to take a step back, I could. Like, we can always step back. Stepping back is like the easy, in my opinion. You just always go back to where you were. So I was like, well, what would it be if I step forward? I have to try to know for sure. So that's the only way I actually find certainty is by action. Like, I can think about for days, but I don't know for sure until I act in it. And then that's what I just started to master with every single risk-taking thing I've done, which has been a lot since that point. But I'd say that was the piece. And then the self-worth development, which really initiated, now it comes to mind. I read A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson in my sophomore year of college, I think it was, where it was the first time self-worth language was even put in front of me. Self-love and self-worth and all those things. And I was like, oh, okay, now I understand why it felt so dysfunctional. Now I can have a path forward to heal, certain areas, but also a new language to step into. And I think that's another thing, we don't do enough of either, is like, if it's not working for us, well, what are we exploring to make it work for us?
Yeah. I often say that clarity comes in two ways. It's through confirmation or challenge, right? But oftentimes we don't know until we do take the step and create the action or create the movement that gives us that clarity, right?
Yeah.
And I also believe, and you've said the word multiple times now, I deeply believe in alignment and congruence. And I believe that oftentimes the greatest amounts of resistance and interference in our lives come from a lack of alignment between our intellectual and emotional narratives.
Yes.
Or between our intent and our actions, right? Or between our desires and our environments, right? But like the reality of it is each and every one of those is a lack of alignment that typically comes from a lack of clarity.
Yep.
Right. And one thing that, again, I find that is a repeat pattern for people who've been able to successfully start to break these things down, as well as start to build more successful businesses and heal different relationships, is literally the ability to take something and put it into action. And by the way, action could also be being with something. Yeah. It could be stillness. It could be reflection. It doesn't always mean act and the do.
Yeah,
but right, like we just said it. See, like, dude, like we're vibing, man. This is I do think that alignment can look different and feel different, or even be defined different, though, for different people.
100%.
And so that's what I would like, is at least for you right now, because you even talk about yourself as an alignment activist, which, by the way, I hadn't heard that term before. I love it. If it's a self-made term, fuck yeah. If it's, right, whatever it is. But I'm like, okay, that's really amazing, because that's what it's all about.
Yes.
What does alignment mean to you? Right. And what has been your calibration tool or tools that have most effectively served you to come back into alignment or accomplish that clarity to get there?
Yeah, I talk to myself a lot. Right? Like, I'm always putting myself in check now to be like, wait, why are you feeling this certain way? Like, I ask about my feelings. I ask about the actions I've taken. Like, I do like self-assessments. I figure out is this on the right pathing? Right? So first of all, you cannot really know what's in alignment if you don't know what your destination is, in essence. Like, or what are we doing all this for? Or what are you showing up for? Right. So I think that clarity piece, which you talk about all the time too, it's like, what is this all for? And I think what we are accustomed to doing is thinking about a tangible outcome or some sort of form of measure outcome, but we're not necessarily thinking about who we have to become in order to stand in that ultimate vision of ourselves. So when I do my languaging, is we all have an ultimate vision for our life. And then our businesses, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like the business is the fuel to that life.
Bingo.
So if you do not think about who you have to become to lead in it all, it's very difficult to then know what's in alignment and what's not. Can you go be a copycat of someone else? Yes. Any single day you want, you can go and copy someone else's actions and probably get the same exact results because you copied them. But I'll tell you that your inner suffering will be so high because it's not who you are genuinely and how you want to even show up in the world, right?
Dude, do you know what just popped in my head when you gave that example?
Tell me.
It's like, you know how like when you make a photocopy of a photocopy and they start getting further distorted?
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, you can literally copy somebody else, but you're a slightly distorted version of it, right? You're a little bit less clear, you're a little bit more murky, and the results likely won't be identical because it wasn't theirs and their authentic voice anyway.
And it honestly wasn't for you.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah. And so
I didn't mean to interject and interrupt.
No, it doesn't, but that's exactly right. That's a great visual, and I love it because it gets muddier, it gets darker, and that's literally how your inner being is going to feel if you keep stepping into the stories that you may have created for survival in that belonging, like I talked about earlier, that you had to be a certain version of yourself in order to survive that circumstance. You know, and I'm someone that like survival mode is just not, I can't go there anymore. And I mean, it happened in my marriage, and I was sitting in that energy, and I had to remove the veil, literal veil, like of that while I was processing my divorce. It happened in businesses or clients even. Like, I reserve the right to fire my clients if they are out of alignment with the work that we anticipated to do, or I can't get them to that destination. I will let that go. But that is a skill that I think, you know, people are afraid of the let go because they don't know what yet to fill it up with, that gap, that void, that etc. So misalignment, just to get back to the point, is when something feels a little off that needs to be questioned. That's it. Because then once you start to question it, you'll realize as you look at the answers to it, okay, so this answer is actually different than I thought it would be. What would it be like to step into that new answer? And that starts to realign you, right? So I'm an alignment activist because I'm always like, well, let's get to the core as to why this is bothering you, or why you're feeling so stressed, or why you're having this chronic illness in the same situation you're in. What about your environment might need to change, right? Like, there's so many different ways, but asking that question to assess, like, this feels a little misaligned. What do I need to ask to then say, okay, based on that answer, this is potentially how I can align it back.
Yeah. I do want to call out a couple things though that you embedded in that I think are really important to call and highlight. In particular, and by the way, I just fired my last client less than 30 days ago.
Yeah.
For a similar reason. And they were on a pretty significant contract. But to me, that is where even integrous relationships begin with ourselves and they extend to others. And if something is not going to maintain the level of integrity that I know I can maintain, want to maintain, and have in terms of my intent for what I know this can take place, whenever those things change, we need to do that. To your point, that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to get to.
Yeah.
It's one of the challenges that I find is, right, people have an inability to let go, right? Have necessary endings, to have closures, right? Up to and including when there's a financial exchange or a perceived transaction. But again, they don't recognize the lost opportunity cost of what could actually happen energetically with time, energy, and focus.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that you brought that piece in.
Yeah.
There was something else that you said that like totally sparked me, and I wanted to go, and it will come back if it's relevant.
Sure.
But in my transition through that, what I am curious, it was questions.
Yes.
I have said for years that I'm only as good as my questions.
Yeah.
And that has become even more true over 25, 30 years of applying that. Oftentimes I say, if you're not getting the answers you want in your life, you aren't getting the outcomes you want in your life, ask better questions, analyze your actions and behaviors, right? And it's like really that simple. Not everybody knows how to ask the right questions, right? But there's also this like desire, like this belief that there is a right and a wrong question, right? And so I'd love it if you could explore that concept of asking questions, how to formulate questions, how to use them for ourselves, how to use them for others. How do we use questions to be a connecting fiber in how we move through the world?
Sure. I mean, it's really, questions are great. It's why I launched the Hey Kareen app, to have a place for people to go and ask their questions and feel supported because like there can be such an embarrassment that lingers around not asking it the right way and uncertainty about what to ask. So I love that you're bringing this up, because I personally think asking the inner questions first are what catapults you forward faster. So if you really want to, like, why am I feeling this way? And then answering it for yourself, whether it's journaling. I'm a big proponent on journaling and writing out like what's going on with your feelings, because it actually helps you take better action. So inner work questions, it's around, why am I feeling this way? What happened that made me feel this way? What is the thing I truly desire? When I want it, what is holding me back from stepping forward to it? And then going outside of yourself to be like, who has actually accomplished or has a semblance of something I aspire to be, that I can go ask them these type of questions. So these questions, I think, are really key for people who have gone before us or have a semblance of some skill set or some mannerism or something that we're looking for to ask. And I love when these questions come my way, only because the how-to questions are great, but the why I did it in the first place is another, great question to ask. So best way to start though is with a how-to question. So, Kareen, if you were in my shoes trying to do XYZ, how would you go about doing it? Very simple. Because now you're creating an opening of a relatable moment of, okay, now I'm putting myself in your shoes, but then with all my acumen, this is how I would go about doing it. That might guide you in a certain way or might sway you in a certain way, but also might just make you think about it in a different approach that you might not have been exposed to yet, right? So that's one way, especially for the community here, to think about is, when I'm hesitant, what can I ask that would put that person in my shoes to answer from that perspective? Because I think that helps us get there a little bit further faster, right?
I agree.
So that's a really good one.
I also think that energy and intent in questions is huge.
Yes.
And I find that so many of us minimize just the pure basic concepts of curiosity and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, so true.
Part of, I think, where people fail on questions is it's almost too formulaic.
Yeah.
And it's not curious enough.
Yeah.
And so as you're getting people to explore themselves, ask these questions, and almost condition, for lack of a better term, this experience of curiosity and openness.
Yeah.
What are the beginning steps that you use to facilitate, fostering that curiosity and exploration
Yeah. I mean, really, one journal exercise that I know that really helped me was like just saying, what else? For some reason, when you just ask, well, what else after your question, or what else after you've answered a question? Well, what else? Like, what else would you recommend? Or what else would you dream of? Or what else could it be? That the what else all of a sudden is an expansive question. It's very simple, but if you start trying it more and more, then you're like, oh, what else? Like, even as I was setting my goals for this year or just trying to dream bigger, and it's a really big dream now, Brian. I have to figure out, like, it's actually a 2-year dream because it's not going to even, be finalized in this one, right? But still, but it was because I was sitting in this, like, what else? What else could it be? And like, does that excite me enough? Or is that like a pull, or is that a push? Like, that is another way I also measure
Agree.
the openness and the curiosity. Is that going to pull me forward? Am I excited to show up for that? Or is that just because I know I can? And that just, like, or I have to. And I measure it that way too. Yeah. But so curiosity really is about that openness and just being more playful, Yeah. I even created a card deck of questions from a leadership standpoint to like a little bit more consciousness around like how we actually are showing up and leading. Because I felt that now when I bring that to my clients and kind of just pull a question and let's have a discussion on it, again, that creates a curiosity and a different way to ask a question too.
Yeah. Well, I have now got extreme curiosity around what this big goal is for you. So let's go there. Like, give us some insights. Like, what's on the docket? What are you focusing on? What's that BHAG for you?
Yeah, so I'm like in this energy of kind of the nomadic way, right? And I have Bedouin blood in me, so the wanderer, like, you can't see the full painting behind me, but it's a camel, like, literally, that is like in my Bedouin blood. But I'm feeling, and I felt pulled, or what the thing that excited me as I was sitting, because I can hit all the goals, I can hit the financial stuff, I can do the entrepreneurial exchanges, I can go invest in businesses. Like, all of a sudden that's become like back of hand stuff, which is crazy in its own way. But I was like, it's not as like, what would charge me to show up for all that, And so the goal that I have set is to go on a somewhat of a world tour in 2026. And so 2025 has to lay the foundation, and I have to do some big personal moves to set up for that in order to then go live extended period of time in different countries that I've always been curious about. This is me showing up fully in my curiosity to go plant myself in other countries and just see what that would be like, and also see how I can serve, like if I can find the gigs, run the workshops, do the work also in those countries, great. But if I need to just set myself up financially this year to allow myself to just explore in 2026, that is what's kind of charging me for my big goals this year, because I'm not at that age where I'm willing to like stay in hostels or like, like do it in a way that doesn't reflect my lifestyle. So I have to make sure that whatever I produce this year could carry into next year, and like make sure it continues to produce into that time. So that's part of it. I want to do keynote talks and be in front of larger audiences and get paid to speak around the world is like, the big stretch goal there. And so this is the year to lay the foundation for that.
All right. Well, I love that, but do I have permission to also reflect something back here?
Of course.
There's some protective energy that's still in there for you, because you are in some ways planning as if you will not have any ability to earn income in this year after as you travel.
Oh, I like a good net. But I know I'll earn.
I get what you're saying, but what I'm also trying to suggest is like, that's minimizing the possibility.
Oh, okay.
Because in such a virtual world as well, like there's earning potential that I know you're like, oh, if this helps, it would be great. But I think that there is a way to create a process and a system that you have virtual opportunities that can fulfill whether or not there's physical ones. And so I just challenge that protective energy, because I love the nature of what you're doing, but I also want you to like fully embrace
go all
that.
Out.
And not go into it, because here's the reality: you're about to expose yourself to different cultures, different perspectives, different ways of living, different qualities of life, different measurements of quality of life.
Yeah,
right. Like in ways that people who travel might experience, but extended living periods are totally different.
It's different.
And it is going to give you a whole lot. And so to fully immerse yourself in that, I think it's also about like extending the impact that is something you desire.
Totally.
And so you're right, you're laying the foundation, but it's not if the speaking and the world tours.
No, it's the when. It's definitely the when.
It's the when and the how, right? Over the course of the next 18, 24 months.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it's really like the goal is to be in another country by mid-December of this year, start that journey, right? So I'm very time conscious in the what can occur and what I do need to do. And I'm very disciplined too, because with every single thing I've chartered for myself, I've always come in early on those goals. But I hear what you're saying, and I take it in that if you're hearing any hesitation on me, it is literally requiring like a release of where I live now. It's like I'm in that discovery mode, and I'm in that analytical mode, right now of like the pieces. But also on top of that, the other big audacious goal is, to write another book that is also through an actual publisher, not a self-published book. And then that track too could be the thing that takes me on this world tour. So I'm being open to the method that gets me into all these different countries that are on my list. But it's just an interesting time. But I'll watch out for that. I appreciate the reflection back, because it is something that I can fatigue myself, in all the analysis.
And again, you are self-identified and realize that you are an overachiever and a high performer that's going to put on more on your plate often than even, is ideal to be on your plate, even though you create alignment and you do this and you have refinement. I guess we all do, right?
Yes.
But the other piece to that is, again, that kind of like protective energy comes from a place of, again, just ensuring that there's safety, right?
Yeah.
Safety for you in every capacity, which also then can translate into control, right? And so that's all I challenge on you in this case is like, you're highly calculated, borderline controlled in your measurements and steps. That's not bad.
No,
but
can be very effective.
This experience teach you around trust and surrender in a way that maybe you haven't experienced?
Sure. Yeah, I will look out for that, because I think I'm not as controlling as I used to be, and I do let a lot of things, slide. In that that's okay. That was what it was meant to be. I think from, like you said, the word safety though for me, and it comes in the planning, but then I'm very present as things unfold. So it's an interesting. This phase is always interesting, and I'm sure folks in your community have felt this way too. It's like you want that end goal, but when you have the uncertainty of how you're going to get there
100%.
And then 100%. I am in consistent action of making sure I'm understanding the best method for me to get there. So if we were to talk in 6 months from now, I'll be like, Brian, I got it handled. Like I already have the places.
I have zero doubt about that, my friend. I'm not challenging your ability to get there.
No,
and
I'm
be
just
present
saying,
and
like, it's
maximize
just
that.
part of the process. It's like where I'm at,
And which I totally understand. I get it. I'm there. I've been there. I've done those exact same things. It translates to potentially less enjoyment and fulfillment in these next 3 to 6 months in a way that you don't need if you allow and trust that everything you've ever wanted, everything you've ever set your mind to, everything you've ever accomplished, the plan has come together. It has worked out. And even when you've planned and it hasn't shaken out to the plan, you have the ability to adjust. And so 100%. To some degree, all I'm suggesting is in this ambiguity, what can you anchor yourself in terms of clarity and known based on what all of your experiences have shown you? And that's just my little friendly challenge to say,
I love it.
How do you surrender to enjoy this entire experience more holistically, even starting now?
Right.
Because that's a part of the journey as well, right?
Yeah. I would say this now phase is a shedding is happening. Like and because of that, it's like it's creating the space for the energy that which I love to let things go. I actually get quite high. I can tell that.
Yeah,
I get high about exits, and I get high about.
It's obvious. It's great.
It's great. I think as I learn, and that's the word keeps coming up in my mind, which is why I want to bring it up, because I'm sure there's a topic we have to discuss about it. But it's managing grief and the grief of the versions of ourselves that we have to let go of in order to step into the version we're meant to become is something that has happened in every transition in my life, that there is a grief process that also has to occur. And and that is something that I think more and more people, if they were to focus on to build that muscle, it could be easier then to let go.
I completely agree with you, and I'm really happy that you brought that word up, right? And to me, it's not even just grieving the versions of ourselves from the past, but it's also grieving the vision for the future that we once had.
Yeah.
Because even as we evolve and change, that means sometimes our priorities do, but it also means that means our vision can shift, right? I mean, anything that can happen in life can change that trajectory, right? Like, there's a grieving process when parents of special needs kids discover, right, that they may have challenges above and beyond. Because what does it mean? It means we have to spend more time, energy, and resources to ensure that we create the path for success.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're right. There's a grieving in all sides of it, up to and including into the future state.
Yes.
And that's a component that I don't think a lot of people talk about.
No.
I don't think
I think it was screaming in my head, like, talk about grief.
I'm so happy you brought it up, though, because it is.
So needed.
But it's so real. It really genuinely is, because it's a part of the entire process.
It is.
And it's, again, even at a cellular level of memory where we react to this emotional triggering, behavioral patterning, environmental conditioning, like, it's so deeply ingrained at the cellular level, trauma passing through the DNA.
Yeah.
The grieving process is so embedded in our experience.
Yes.
That makes us feel shitty sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And so
the shitty is okay. It's the skills that pull you up and forward. Because you know, like people who have actually lost people, and even what's happening now in this world and all the crazy, you know, natural disaster type loss, right? Like, there's a grief that is weighing on so many, that if we don't start sharing grief management tools to know that, like, grief, I think the saying is, like, grief is like a new friend that taps in every now and again. Like, you don't really actually get rid of it. It is part of us through every transition in life we go through, whether it's a physical thing we've lost, a physical person we've lost, whatever that is. But having the tools to be more present in the moment and release the things that are not needed anymore, but had value for a certain period of time. You're like that grief energy is something that, it's really bizarre how comfortable I found myself with grief and grief management and grief holding and just holding space for others and even for myself. But the moving through and the energy of onward is the other half of it. Right.
Yeah.
It's the ability to be like, oh, I learned this from that transition, but this is what I choose to take forward with me. And when I need to tap into grief again, this is my method to tap into it, to then still move onward, you know, from that all too.
You know, we teach that our trash and our treasure is often formed in the same moments. Right. And so there is truth to all of that. And you know, it's the dynamic that so many people, when they become more aware, just become more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves versus knowing what to do about it, right? Those future forward, objective, non-judgmental perspectives that are extracting lessons versus judgments and criticisms around stuff. I mean, it really is something that requires skill. But something else you said, I want to also kind of extend into a different portion of this conversation for just a second. I don't care what emotion it is. I don't think that any of them fully go away. Right. Like, I think whether it's low energy frequency and emotion, like shame, blame, anger, fear, like it's never complete eradication of these things, because we are human. Right. It's to me spending less and less and less time in them because of the process of releasing, healing, no longer getting triggered in some of the same ways, rewriting some of those same patterns. Yeah. But I think that I've always said, it's like you almost have to be vigilant in your effort to see these things, because they'll be adversaries in constant pursuit for the rest of our lives. And that doesn't mean we need to be in this constant state of anxiety either, right? No. And so it's about learning the tools to compress the time that we spend in that space and the
Yep.
tools to effectively like move through it. And so you reference specifically grief tools, right? You've talked about different elements of awareness and curiosity and questions and clarity. We've covered a lot of topics here.
Yeah.
but on the concept of grief in particular, since we did bring it to a place of awareness, what's your favorite one or two tools around grieving or allowing people to grieve effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works different for each person. The tools that I've leaned into, I check in with myself. Like I said, it's the inner work where I'm like, well, what was bringing me down right now? Like what is happening to me, or why am I having this overwhelming feeling of heaviness? Because grief sometimes for me shows up in the I'm almost like a sloth. Like I slow down a lot. I don't really want to do much. I'm finding myself wanting to rewatch shows or like crawl into bed. Like it's a form of like the slothiness is the best way for me to describe it. And I'm like, okay, Kareen, like go move your body. I will go and feel it, and then realize that it's not who I want to show up as. So let's just go move a little bit, whether it's dance, walk, do a workout, whatever that is. But I will get back into my body, because generally grief is also the storytelling that's going on in our mind. Like it's something that, yes, we have an emotional thing. If it's a true loss of someone you've loved or something you loved, that yes, there's a heartbroken part, but you are present right now in this moment. And whatever it is that got lost or is lost now or no longer for you is no longer present. So that's a choice. And so I found for me, I would definitely get back into my body and move my body when I'm have that heaviness. And then I process my thoughts. Because sometimes with me, like a walking meditation or just moving my body then allows the clearer thoughts to come up, to be like, okay, this is what's bothering me, or this is what I'm missing. And I'll have a conversation. If it is about a person that I've lost, I will have a conversation, with that person and create an energetic memory, connection memory, or what would that person say to me if I were behaving this way around them right now, or, and just find the more uplifting, connected time with what I lost. Yeah. When I sit in gratitude, if it's a physical thing I've lost, or if it's something that I've lost that client, or, like end of last year, was very interesting. Like I lost a big chunk of a contract for one of my businesses that we had just renewed. And I felt like it was like a slap in the face. And I was on some amazing trip. I was in London at the time with a girlfriend of mine that we were just like having our little getaway. And then here's this news. And I easily could have sat in a heaviness of, like, now how am I going to make that up? And what's going to happen to my team? And what, all the things. So granted, I had the loss energy, but I wanted to be so present on that trip. So I had to decide how I wanted to show up with that new information and who I knew I am, who I like, how I know I've become, or who I know I've become, to manage through it. Yeah. So moving my body, taking action, and then, but also recognizing what is it that I'm actually feeling and what can I now do about it, or what do I want to take forward with me about this situation. And a lot of gratitude, because I learned with every challenge I've moved through,
Totally. I appreciate how universal truths communicated through a different person, just land different. They're different and accessible. And the similarities and complementary natures, but also contrast even in the language that you and I use. It's teaching the same concepts, which is also really, really beautiful. One of the things that you said early, it's important. You had to learn the pattern of listening to your body and actually paying attention to the signs and the tells of that state, right? Yeah. And really using that then to understand either what in your external world or internal world put you there, as well as then the tangible elements to start to, again, take action and move yourself forward. The simplification of all of that is really where it comes in, but also your ability then, the power of choice. right? I love the ability to choose in any given moment where we want to focus our energy and attention. It's the lack of ability to do that causes perseveration and spinning and all this like overwhelm and overthinking. And those of us that have learned those patterns are doing the best we can in as many moments as possible to choose to not to, but it still affects us. But you talk about all of these different ways that you can choose. You step into clarity, you have gratitude. But one of the other things that we talked about early pre-show, and it's really the last topic I want to hit on, at least for the purposes of this discussion, because I have a feeling we're going to do some more together, is you were the breadwinner of your marriage. You went through a separation, right? And there are many women that I know who, for a variety of reasons, whether it's the legal structures in their state, country, or whatever, whether it's some dynamic with financial or kids or business entanglement, there's so many layers and complications that I find often make it more difficult for women in particular to leave or exit a relationship and again, be okay and all of the above.
Yeah.
Could you just give, I guess, a little bit of a narrative around the story that you went into? What were the dynamics that you're able to talk about as it led to you stepping into creating this next step in your life for you independent? Yeah. And maybe how intentional you had to be in navigating that process to make sure that, again, safety was of the essence.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I lost myself in the latter, I want to say maybe like 6 years of my marriage. The first time I had brought up divorce was we were living in Colorado, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Like there was this mismatch of our energies for a long time that because I'm a high integrity follow through person, I made a commitment. I love this person. I want to stay in this marriage. My heart was leading my mind at that time. And so when that first time I had asked for divorce, there was a meltdown on his part in a way that really was asking for us to work with someone to figure out how we can make it better. And, in hindsight, I look at it and I was like, okay, that was again, probably more of my people pleasing side that didn't want to abandon a commitment. And so I was willing. I was like, you know what? I didn't try doing the work with him with some, a third party. So we'll try it. But as immersive as I am, in the way I like to move through things, because if you can imagine someone who likes to move onward, so we had to go, I found a relationship coach that we worked with and did like an immersive, 6-week situation to, help us in understanding each other. Cause that's the one thing, relationships aren't taught. Relationship management isn't taught. And then we're put into a legal, right? And then we're put into a legal structure. And then you're like, wait, what just happened? It's very, it's all fantasy, honestly, like the construct of marriage. And then you have the legalities of it. So, at that point I had been married, 8 years. We decided to move back east because that was one of the issues that had come up. We were, he wasn't happy Colorado, and it was like, okay, let's go closer to family, move back east. So when we came back, that was when I became the breadwinner. But up until that point, we were both contributing. And he went on an entrepreneurial venture, and I was like, great, I'm an entrepreneurial coach, but you can't coach your husband, right? So that's a no-no to anybody. Any of you coaches out there, do not coach your spouse.
Don't even try.
It doesn't work. Try. And I also didn't want to be in business with him, and co-manage this business he was launching, because that didn't work. We tried it once before and it didn't work. Anyway, so it turned into me, hustling, carrying, the bills. And we actually doubled our expenses moving back east. So it was a lot on my plate. But the pandemic hit, and then, it changed emotionally here at the house. And I realized that I had truly been masking my, how would I put it? I was very off center. I became someone I wasn't to sustain this marriage. And I found myself, remember I was saying I'm slothy, when grief hits. So I found myself going to corners of the house to self-preserve because I didn't feel comfortable in all areas of the house that I was paying for. Right. Like, so there was there's just such a thing. So what I had to do first was work on me, because obviously I'm showing up as a version of me that doesn't make sense. So anybody who's listening, and if you're in the throes of divorce, if you do not have a therapist or someone to work with on a consistent basis, just to talk through whatever the heck you're feeling, definitely get on board with that, because you need it. You just do. Like, you're dealing with stressors now as you're navigating change, that having someone in the mental health, world to hold space for you is just life-giving. On top of that, I did inner work and I became a certified breathwork healer. So again, I was doing all the work on me to then be my most solid person, to then finally take action and follow through on the now asking for a divorce at this stage, almost 6 years later. It was like almost 6 years later after the first time. With being the breadwinner, I'll tell you that I'm someone that likes polarity in my relationships. I like to feel that I am taken care of, whether it is emotional care and or financial care. That's a blessing, but at least come equal to what I can contribute, and make sure for sure you could take care of yourself. Because that for me was where I was compromising with my generosity, when actually I had a need that I was not willing to say that I had. And that was unfair to him, because I was every time he's like, well, I'll just go do this. And I'd be like, no, I got it. Like, that's on me. Right. But the risk now, when you're going through divorce and the legalities around divorce, you have to be strategic and you have to treat it like a business. So entrepreneurs in general have a hard time being in a relationship because we just think different. We really do. Like, we approach things very different, right? And so being in a relationship can be a challenge if you also don't have the support and the systems as to how you can be your best in that relationship. In the strategic arena of divorcing and being the one that asked for the divorce, I was very fortunate that my friendship with my ex-husband, and the care we had for each other ultimately came first as we decided how we were going to go about the divorce.
Which is how I would hope it would be for everybody.
I really do. Yeah. But a lot of people can't deal with rejection, and they start to get almost like the villain in them comes out. Yep. So, and it was very easy that it could have been that way. Like, I could have tipped the wound, right? And then I could have gotten the villain in return. But instead, I just kept finding ways to hold space outside of the legal conversations where the emotions would come out. And I think that's important, because he was like, well, he really was still asking to stay married and let's go, work on it, etc. I said, I'm happy to go talk to a therapist if we're focusing on our divorce. Like, I had to stand my ground, but I also was willing to do the work if we had to make sure that it was amicable on the other side. As the breadwinner, this is the most messed up things you find out on the legal side of things. Did you know you could literally stay married and treat your spouse like absolute crap, and there's no repercussions for it because you're under the legal veil of marriage, whether it's the husband to the wife or the wife to the husband, everything outside of abuse, obviously, but I'm talking like a financial side of things. I could have stayed married and given absolutely nothing and placated the marriage and had affairs and done all the things to but that's not me in integrity. But legally, that is actually possible. But as soon as you start to bring the government into what you signed up for as the contract of marriage in order to dissolve it, all of a sudden there are all these demands on what you have to do, which is crazy.
Well, and what I will say, and I don't mean this to be necessarily polarizing, but there is regression in that in parts of the United States as we speak.
Most of it.
Laws but there are laws that are going in place that are reversing even less rights that have been given, up to and including in marriage, right? Yeah. Like, we're not just talking reproductive rights, we're talking marital rights, your property, ownership rights, and property rights. Yeah,
you are property in a marriage,
and it's something that I say knowing that there are people who will hear that and completely reject that as truth, but it needs to be discussed, because if we're going to be approaching things under the guise of security and safety for our women, that comes through equal opportunity and equal rights, literally, and it gets a bigger pot with more people who win. But yes, as a father of a daughter, I struggle with that a lot, and I'm grateful for you speaking to it, because my daughter will not become property.
No. And it's also learning the different levels of commitment and how you can cohabitate, and how, like, unfortunately, if you make the decision, and this is where we're kind of blinded. It's not even a veil. It's like a straight up blinder on what are you actually signing up for when you sign a marriage license. And that contract, it's a contract that the government sets for you. And I forget the gentleman's name. He's this top divorce lawyer, and he was on a podcast interview, and he said, you can either decide the contract you are signing up for, or let the government decide. So he's all about, like, at least initiating the prenup side of things, because it at least is a beginning of trying to protect yourself and trying to be equal partners coming into this, right? And I used to say when I was younger, and it actually was quite shocking that I even got married at all, because I used to say it was like it's mergers and acquisitions. Like it is property management, and you have to decide how much of you are you giving up. And it's really the hardest thing to unravel, is because you're in an emotional state trying to do something very strategic. Yeah. So as much as it was a gut hit of how financially I had to end things, I know on the other side of it, like, I am so much lighter and so much happier, and there's so much, and we still talk, like, we're amicable, and check on each other in each other's lives. It's not meant for us going forward. Yeah. And I think, and I wish that for everybody who's going through any sort of breakup, that you can figure out a way to hold an integrity of who you are and stick with your values through it. Because there is the other side. There will be the other side. It might not be as fast as you'd like it to be sometimes. I moved through mine quite fast because I knew the system. I learned the system to know how quickly I could move through it. And I'm grateful that I did. And, now I get to choose what I want to do for myself. And as I am dating and, like, deciding, relationship stuff going forward, it's like, marriage, that would be a heavy thought for me to consider again,
Well, and I think there's a big trend of people starting to wake up to that, and a lot of our younger generation of women recognizing and making decisions to try to chase what they want and have the economic freedom that I in some ways would call you a pioneer, but that's also it's dismissing the people that were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of you in some ways. But again, you're forging a trail of what can be possible for other women. And, my wife and I never felt the need to get married. Right. We wanted to one day, but again, to the point of that, I don't know that either of us, even when that took place, understood, like, all of that.
What you were signing up for.
And really, what does that mean? And I'm sitting here saying, I'm not advocating for one thing or another, but pay attention to what's in alignment for you and what you want long term. And is marriage the way to get there? I know lots of couples that have kids and have 20-year relationships and don't have a legal document, right? That's right. And does that make that anything less? No.
Well, so other things to look out for too is each state, and I'm not a lawyer, but I have great legal friends if anyone needs one. But I know too, each state law is different. So
every state law is different.
It's and not only different on the marital laws, but also the divorcing laws.
Correct.
So it's like if you move and you relocate and you're getting a divorce in a state that you didn't get married in, right? Like, it's a whole, like, you're now bound by that structure. Yep. So it's pretty wild how it's an antiquated system that hasn't caught up with how we actually live. And definitely, human rights in general again, it's just a scary time. That
kind of describes a lot of the systems that we're currently in.
Yeah, it's just antiquated.
Really, and again, I don't think they necessarily reflect, again, where we are and where we're going or where we could be going.
Yeah, and I'll take the pioneer stance on the fact that I have no shame about the fact that I am divorced. And I think that is another thing that happened to women for many years, getting out of just really bad situations where shame was put onto a lot of women for making that choice to be out of it. Yeah.
I literally have coached a number of them through a variety of things, whether it's a faith-based structure system or different pieces. What I was actually meaning, and I'm actually appreciative that you're going to take the pioneer on the divorce side of it. I was actually meaning that you chased independence and financial independence earlier in your life.
Oh, prior, yeah.
Right? Like you prioritized that earlier in your life, and therefore you also knew you had the skill sets and abilities to make it on your own, so that when you were faced in this situation, not only were you the breadwinner, but you were like, I mean, I've done this before, I can do this again, right? Like,
and that was a lesson from my mom going through the divorce.
But I think that's powerful. I think it's powerful because that doesn't translate necessarily to how everyone lives, and it's an important distinction. My friend, you do awesome work, but you do awesome work because of who you are, right? Like the way that you work, the way that you help people evolve. I align with your methodology, the number of certifications to deepen your education and your relevance and your impact in people's lives, your focus on clarity, alignment, right? Compassion, empathy, and ultimately love first, all makes you such an accessible, relatable, and transformational person to align with. I know you've created an AI app, right? That gives people interactions. I'd love it if you could just give some insights on that. We'll put the links in the notes. And then after you talk about the AI app, what I'd love is, could you just give us a closing thought from your heart?
Okay, sure. So my Hey Kareen app, all things are now directed towards heykareen.com. But the app was built to make sure that my time capacity wasn't stopping the people who wanted support, especially for entrepreneurs trying to navigate all the challenges that they come across, that they can now go into the app and talk to my clone. I cloned myself, all my acumen, the way I actually approach things, and my friends have tested it, which is so much fun. They'll ask me directly, like they'll test me the question, I'll answer them, and then they'll go ask the app, and they're like, you said the same thing. I was like, yeah, she's me. I use her. I even use her because sometimes I just want the summary of what would I tell, what would I say, you know? So I built it for that reason. It's your on the go business coach, but it also centralizes all my content, my program, you know, my workbooks, any interviews. This interview will be on there. Like anything that I have created, it's one centralized place. And I wanted to create a non-distraction arena for people to get the support they need. So that's the Hey Kareen app and the Hey Kareen platform. And that's at heykareen.com.
Dude, I love it. All right.
Message from my heart.
From your heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, truly, it's an honor to be able to mentally spar with you, Brian, and serve, right? Like I have a heart of service. I always have. Learning how to make sure I give that heart the love it needs in order to show up every day is what I wish for everybody to discover for themselves, because it looks different for everybody else. And so if I have any message for anyone listening who might be sitting in a misaligned state or just feeling a little bit fractured right now, is just to know that you are loved and that the love you have to give is so worthy of being received by those around you. And if someone hasn't told you that lately, just please hear it from me.
I just so appreciate who you are, how you move through the world. And I'm grateful for your vulnerability and for your heart, as well as your mind and shared experiences today through the course of the show. I know that it was really impactful for lots of others, and I'm really grateful for you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who just watched Kareen flip her lid and jump in, it is a story that she clearly has unpacked. She can decipher her life in a really simple set of patterns, but when she goes deeper, we start to see the relevance to all of our shared human experiences, the ways that we've been compressed, the ways that we've been dictated, who we need to be, and the choice we have in every single moment to be able to continue to step in and allow ourselves to find clarity, alignment, and ultimately evolve, because there is no final destination, only constant evolution of self. Her evolved methodology, the way she lives it as a model and an example, is a way that you all can live and learn as well. But it is going to require you to start asking those tough questions of yourself, the inside ones, which requires you to flip open your lid and scan your can. We'll see y'all next time. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible.
But to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.